The Seeds of Love and Loss. Once upon a time, in a quiet suburb nestled between rolling hills and whispering pines, there lived a man named Ethan. He was a man of quiet strength, a dreamer whose heart yearned for the simple joys of life, a family to call his own, a home filled with love, and the laughter of children ringing through the halls. But fate, as it often does, had other plans for him. Ethan had been married to Lena for 6 years. Their love had once been a roaring fire, fueled by shared dreams and whispered promises under the stars. Yet over time, that fire had dwindled, dampened not by any lack of affection, but by the weight of unspoken expectations and the silent agony of their greatest struggle. Ethan and Lena had been unable to conceive a child. It wasn't for lack of trying. Doctors had been consulted, tests conducted, and countless nights spent in hopeful prayer. Yet, every month brought the same heartache, a fresh reminder of what they longed for but couldn't seem to attain. The cruel words that broke the dam. Lena's mother, Patricia, had always been a formidable presence. She was a woman of sharp opinions and even sharper words, and she had never approved of Ethan. To her, he was a dreamer with no tangible achievements, a man who didn't measure up to the ambitious future she had envisioned for her daughter. Patricia's disapproval had always been a quiet hum in the background of their marriage, but it grew louder as the years went by without a child. One evening, during a family gathering, Patricia's sharp tongue finally lashed out. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with condescension as she glanced at Ethan across the dinner table, "it's a shame Lena married someone who can't even give her a child. It's as if you're incomplete." The words hit Ethan like a thunderbolt, their cruelty sinking deep into his chest. He turned to Lena, expecting her to defend him, to stand up to her mother's cutting words. But to his shock and dismay, Lena said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes, a quiet agreement that shattered something inside him. Later that night, as they drove home in heavy silence, Ethan finally broke. "How could you let her say that to me?" he asked, his voice trembling with hurt and anger. "She's just frustrated," Lena replied, her tone dismissive. "She didn't mean it." "But you didn't defend me," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You let her insult me, humiliate me, as if I was nothing." Lena sighed, looking out the window. "Maybe it's time we face the truth, Ethan. Maybe this is your fault." The breaking point. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. Lena's words, her mother's disdain, and the weight of his own insecurities churned in his mind like a storm. For years, he had blamed himself, shouldering the burden of their infertility, even though the doctors had assured them it wasn't, something either of them could control. But that night, something shifted in him. He realized that love, the kind of love he had dreamed of, should never make him feel so small, so unwanted. It wasn't just Patricia's words or Lena's silence that had broken him. It was the realization that he had been fighting for a marriage where he stood alone. The next morning, Ethan made the hardest decision of his life. As the sun rose, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink, he packed a small bag and left. A note on the kitchen counter. A new beginning. The months that followed were a whirlwind of pain, reflection, and growth. Ethan moved to a small cabin by the lake, seeking solace in the quiet embrace of nature. He threw himself into his work as a freelance artist, pouring his emotions onto canvas. Each painting became a reflection of his journey: grief, anger, acceptance, and eventually hope. It was during one of his art exhibits that Ethan met Claire. She was a writer, a woman with a kind smile and an easy laugh, someone who seemed to see the world through the same lens of wonder and creativity. They bonded over late-night conversations about life, love, and the scars they carried. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, truly seen. Claire didn't judge him for his past or for the pain he carried. Instead, She encouraged him to embrace it, to let it shape him, but not define him. The unexpected gift. A year later, Ethan and Claire were married in a simple ceremony by the lake. It wasn't the grand wedding Ethan had once envisioned, but it was perfect in its intimacy and authenticity. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves painted the ground in shades of red and gold, Claire gave Ethan a piece of news that brought tears to his eyes. She was pregnant. The journey that followed was filled with joy and gratitude, but also a deep sense of reflection. As Ethan held his newborn daughter for the first time, he realized that his journey wasn't just about finding love or becoming a father. It was about rediscovering his own worth, about learning that he deserved love that uplifted and celebrated him. A visit from the past years passed, and Ethan's life bloomed with joy and fulfillment. His daughter, Lily, grew into a curious and compassionate child, with Claire's creativity and his unwavering determination. The cabin by the lake had become a haven for their small family, a place filled with love, laughter, and countless memories etched into its wooden walls. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the lake shimmered in hues of orange and pink, Ethan heard a knock at the door. It was rare for visitors to venture this far, so he opened the door with a mix of curiosity and caution. Standing there was Lena, her eyes heavy with the weight of time and unspoken emotions. She looked both familiar and distant, a ghost from a life he had left behind. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I know I shouldn't have come unannounced, but I needed to see you." A conversation. Long overdue, Ethan invited her in, offering her a cup of tea as they sat by the fireplace. The warmth of the flames flickered across their faces, bridging the gap between past and present. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the crackling of the fire. Finally, Lena broke the stillness. "I've thought about that night, about what I said and didn't say, every day since you left," she began. "I was wrong, Ethan. I let my insecurities, my mother's opinions, and my own fears overshadow the love we once had. And for that, I am truly sorry." Ethan studied her face, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. He felt no anger, only a bittersweet ache for the years they had lost. "Lena, I forgave you a long time ago," he said gently. "Holding on to that pain would have only hurt me more. I hope you found peace, too." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I have in some ways. But seeing you now, I realize how much I didn't understand back then, how much I didn't appreciate the man you were." Ethan smiled, a mix of gratitude and closure settling over him. "We were both trying our best with what we knew. Sometimes, things fall apart so that better things can come together." A new understanding. As the evening wore on, their conversation turned to lighter topics. Lena shared stories of her travels and the new life she had built, while Ethan spoke of Claire and Lily. There was no bitterness, only an understanding that their paths had diverged for a reason. Before Lena left, she stood on the porch, gazing out at the lake. "You've built something beautiful here, Ethan," she said. "I'm happy you found the happiness you deserved." "So did you," Ethan replied. "That's all that matters." The strength of moving forward. After Lena left, Ethan returned to the living room where Claire sat waiting with a knowing smile. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice warm and steady. "It went well," Ethan said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "It was good to see her, to close that chapter." "Completely." Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "You've always had a way of turning pain into something beautiful. I'm proud of you." In that moment, Ethan realized just how far he had come. His life was no longer defined by the wounds of the past, but by the love and hope he had cultivated in its place. The story continues. As the years rolled on, Ethan's life remained a testament to resilience and renewal. He and Claire raised Lily with the values they both held dear: kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to chase one's dreams. Every so often, Ethan would think back to the life he once had, not with regret, but with gratitude for the lessons it had taught him. It reminded him that even in the face of heartbreak, there was always the promise of a new beginning. And so, the man who had once been broken became whole again, his story a beacon of hope for anyone who dared to believe in second chances. For in the end, it is not the trials we face that define us, but the love we find and the lives we touch along the way. The legacy of Love Ethan's life continued to unfold like a tapestry, each thread woven with care and intention. Lily grew into a remarkable young woman, her creativity blossoming under the guidance of her parents. She often joined Ethan in his studio, splattering paint with the same unbridled enthusiasm she had for life. One day, as they worked side by side, Lily asked a question that caught Ethan off guard. "Dad, what made you so strong? You always seem so calm, like nothing can shake you." Ethan paused, considering his answer. "It's not that I'm unshakable, sweetheart," he said, wiping his hands on a paint-streaked rag. "It's that I've learned to see every challenge as an opportunity to grow. Life isn't always fair, but it's what we do with the pieces that makes us whole." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Is that why you paint? To turn the hard things into something beautiful?" Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Exactly. And you know what? You can do the same with art, words, or even just how you treat people. That's the real strength, creating beauty in the face of hardship." An unexpected reunion years later, Ethan's art gained national recognition. Galleries across the country displayed his works, each piece telling a story of resilience, hope, and transformation. At one such exhibit in a bustling New York gallery, he encountered a face he hadn't seen in decades: Patricia, Lena's mother. The years had softened her once imposing demeanor. Her hair, now silver, framed a face marked with lines of age and reflection. She approached Ethan hesitantly, her eyes betraying a mix of guilt and longing. "Ethan," she said, her voice quieter than he remembered. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I needed to see you, to apologize." Ethan studied her, surprised, but not angry. "Patricia," he said gently, "you don't need to apologize. Time has a way of putting things into perspective." "Doesn't it?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I was wrong about you. So wrong. And I see now that I let my pride and prejudice blind me to the man you were, the man you are." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes, Patricia. What matters is what we learn from them, and I've learned that holding on to bitterness only keeps us from moving forward." Full circle. That night, Ethan reflected on how far he had come. He thought of the boy he had been, the dreamer with a heart full of hope, and the man he had become, shaped by the trials and triumphs of life. His journey had taught him that love wasn't just about romance. It was about forgiveness, compassion, and the courage to rebuild when everything seemed lost. As he walked through the gallery surrounded by his life's work, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. Each painting was a testament to his story, a reminder that beauty could arise from even the darkest moments. And as he returned home to Claire and Lily, he knew that his greatest masterpiece wasn't the art he created, but the life he had built, one filled with love, strength, and an unshakable belief in the power of new beginnings. The end. Revenge is a potent force, born from the bitter seed of betrayal. For Ethan, whose heart had once been shattered by Lena's silence and her mother's cruelty, the idea of revenge was not one of spiteful theatrics, but one of transformation. If they had thought to reduce him to nothing, he would rise, stronger and untouchable, from the ashes of their disdain. The path of painful resolve. Ethan had walked away from Lena and her toxic family with little more than his dignity, but even as he rebuilt his life, the sting of betrayal lingered. He could still hear Patricia's venomous words, still feel the weight of Lena's silence when she had allowed her mother's cruelty to go unanswered. He wanted to heal, yes, but he also wanted them to understand the depth of their mistake. The rise of the unseen. Ethan buried himself in his art. What had once been a personal solace became a weapon, wielded with purpose. His work evolved, gaining a voice that spoke to resilience, pain, and redemption. Critics took notice. Galleries clamored for his pieces. Soon, the name Ethan Grant was whispered in elite circles, his paintings fetching prices that most could only dream of. But Ethan wasn't satisfied with just success. He wanted those who had doubted him, diminished him, to see it too. The bait. One day he received an email from Lena. It was a simple message, congratulating him on his recent success. She mentioned how proud she was of him and even expressed regret for how things had ended between them. But what stood out most was a subtle request. Patricia was hosting a charity gala, and Lena wondered if Ethan might be willing to donate a piece of his art to the event. Ethan's lips curled into a wry smile. The invitation wasn't about reconciliation. It was about leverage. Patricia wanted to bask in the glow of his newfound fame, to claim some measure of credit for the man he had become. Perfect, Ethan thought. He replied graciously, agreeing to donate one of his paintings. He even offered to attend the event, in person, a gesture that Lena responded to with enthusiasm. The Gala of Reckoning. The night of the gala was a spectacle of wealth and pretense. The city's elite gathered in an opulent ballroom, sipping champagne under crystal chandeliers. Patricia was in her element, mingling with the powerful and influential, her sharp tongue now sweetened with feigned charm. When Ethan arrived, dressed, in a tailored suit and exuding quiet confidence, heads turned. He was no longer the quiet, uncertain man they had once dismissed. He was magnetic, commanding attention with an effortless grace. Patricia greeted him warmly, her smile brittle but polite. "Ethan," she said, taking his hand, "how wonderful to see you. Your success has been extraordinary." "Thank you, Patricia," Ethan replied, his tone as smooth as silk. "I'm honored to be here tonight." As the evening progressed, Ethan unveiled the painting he had donated. It was a breathtaking piece, a stormy seascape, its dark waves crashing against jagged cliffs. But there was more to it than met the eye. Hidden within the strokes were subtle symbols, a shattered family crest, a shadowy figure standing alone amidst the chaos, and a phoenix rising from the ruins. The crowd was captivated, but Patricia paled as she studied the details. She recognized the imagery, the unmistakable parallels to Ethan's past. It was as if the painting was calling out her betrayal for all to see. The final stroke. As the auction began, the painting fetched an astronomical price. The room buzzed with admiration, and Patricia, despite her discomfort, couldn't resist basking in the glow of the attention. When the final bid was announced, Ethan stepped forward to address the crowd. "I'm deeply grateful for your support," he began. "This piece represents a journey, one of pain, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. It's a reminder that, even in the face of darkness, we can rise again, stronger and more resolute than before." His eyes flicked to Patricia, holding her gaze for a brief moment. And sometimes, the very people who seek to diminish us unknowingly fuel our greatest triumphs. The room erupted in applause, but Patricia's face was a mask of humiliation. She knew the painting was as much a declaration as it was a masterpiece, a declaration that Ethan had risen above her attempts to belittle him, leaving her to grapple with the bitter taste of her own actions. The true victory. Ethan left the gala that night with a sense of closure. He hadn't needed to shout or point fingers. His success, his dignity, and his unshakable spirit had spoken louder than any words ever could. As he returned home to Claire and Lily, he felt a deep sense of peace. Revenge, he realized, didn't have to be cruel or vindictive. The greatest revenge was living well, rising above, and proving to those who doubted you that their judgment was nothing more than a fleeting shadow. Revenge, a calculated symphony. Revenge, for Ethan, was never about rage or recklessness. It was a game of patience, precision, and justice. He wasn't interested in meaningless destruction or chaos. His plan had to be elegant, poetic, and above all, untraceable. Those who had wronged him would feel the weight of their actions, not through violence, but by the slow unraveling of their carefully curated lives. Step 1. The foundation. Ethan began his plan the way a master painter begins a canvas, with deliberate strokes. He spent months researching Patricia's family business, a real estate empire that prided itself on an unblemished reputation. Publicly, it was a paragon of integrity, but behind the scenes, Ethan unearthed whispers of corruption, bribed officials, shady land deals, and environmental violations swept under the rug. Lena, meanwhile, had stayed loyal to her mother, working as a key figure in the company. She had tried to reconnect with Ethan on several occasions, sending polite emails and even a handwritten letter. But Ethan knew these attempts weren't born of genuine remorse. They were calculated, designed to gauge whether he might be a threat. He played the long game, responding with kindness but maintaining his distance. He allowed Lena to believe that he had moved on, that he bore no ill will. This illusion was crucial. Step 2. Assembling the pieces. Ethan enlisted the help of a private investigator, a former journalist who specialized in uncovering corporate scandals. Together, they compiled a damning dossier on Patricia's business dealings. Every bribe, every forged document, every corner cut in the name of profit was meticulously documented. But Ethan didn't stop there. He began attending charity events and art galas where Patricia and Lena were regulars, carefully rebuilding his image as a cordial acquaintance. He even donated a piece of art to one of Patricia's fundraisers, knowing it would deepen her belief that he had moved past their history. Keep your enemies close, he thought, and let them underestimate you. Step 3. The first strike. The first move was subtle, a leak to a trusted journalist. An article appeared in a respected business magazine outlining vague allegations of misconduct within Patricia's company. The piece was careful not to name names, but suggested that a powerful real estate firm was being scrutinized by environmental regulators. The article created a ripple of unease. Investors began asking questions, and competitors seized the opportunity to cast doubt on Patricia's operations. Lena reached out to Ethan soon after. "Did you see the article?" she asked during a chance meeting at a gallery. "I did," Ethan replied, feigning surprise. "It's unfortunate. I hope it's not about your mother's company." Lena frowned but said nothing. The seed of doubt had been planted. Step 4. The unraveling Ethan's next move was to target Patricia's allies, powerful figures who had enabled her corruption. Anonymous tips were sent to regulatory agencies, complete with evidence of illegal activities. Inspections were ordered, contracts were revoked, and the carefully maintained facade of Patricia's empire began to crumble. Meanwhile, Ethan cultivated relationships with activists and community leaders who had long opposed Patricia's developments. With his growing influence as an artist, he became a vocal advocate for ethical business practices, positioning himself as a champion of the very causes Patricia had undermined. Public sentiment turned against her. Protesters picketed her offices, demanding accountability. The media dug deeper, unearthing scandals that even Ethan hadn't anticipated. Step 5. The final blow. When the time was right, Ethan released the full dossier to the press. The evidence was irrefutable. Patricia's company was implicated in numerous crimes, from tax evasion to environmental destruction. The fallout was swift and brutal. Shares in the company plummeted, lawsuits flooded in. Patricia's carefully curated reputation lay in tatters, her name now synonymous with greed and corruption. Lena, caught in the crossfire, was forced to resign. She called Ethan, her voice trembling. "Did you have anything to do with this?" she asked. Ethan paused, letting the silence hang heavy between them. "I don't know what you mean, Lena," he said finally, "but perhaps this is what happens when people build their success on the suffering of others." Closure. Ethan didn't revel in their downfall. It wasn't about gloating. His revenge wasn't driven by hatred, but by the desire for justice, for balance. Patricia and Lena had once sought to diminish him, to strip him of his worth. Now, they were left to face the consequences of their own actions. Ethan returned to his life with a sense of closure. He had fought back not with anger, but with strategy and integrity. And in doing so, he had reclaimed his power, proving that even the deepest betrayals could be transformed. The shadow of betrayal. Returns. Ethan had believed that he and Claire had rebuilt something unshakable. After years of love, compromise, and the resilience to weather life's storms, he felt their marriage had become stronger than ever. But even the most fortified walls can harbor hidden cracks, and one day, Ethan's world was upended again. The whispered warning, it began with a subtle shift in Claire's behavior. She became distant, her laughter more reserved, her attention divided. The late nights at work grew frequent, accompanied by vague explanations and a new preoccupation with her appearance. Ethan noticed the signs, but dismissed them initially, unwilling to let suspicion taint the life they had worked so hard to build. Then one evening, as he sat at their kitchen table, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "I think you deserve to know. Claire's been seeing someone else. Check her phone if you don't believe me." Ethan's heart sank. He stared at the message, feeling the same ache he thought he had long since conquered. Was history repeating itself? A shattering discovery. That night, while Claire slept, Ethan picked up her phone. His hands trembled as he hesitated, debating whether to cross the line of trust. But the nagging suspicion and the anonymous message compelled him forward. The truth was laid bare in a string of messages to someone named Marcus. The texts were filled with playful banter, inside jokes, and confessions of love. Ethan's chest tightened as he read, "I can't wait to see you again. Tonight was amazing. You're the only one who really understands me." The betrayal was undeniable. The confrontation. Ethan didn't confront Claire immediately. He needed time to think, to decide how to handle the situation. He sought advice from a trusted friend, Daniel, who had been by his side through his first marriage's collapse. "Don't act impulsively," Daniel warned. "You've been through this before. Think about what you really want and what she's worth to you now." Ethan nodded, knowing his friend was right. This time, he wouldn't let anger dictate his actions. 2 days later, Ethan sat Claire down. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. "Claire," he began, "is there something you need to tell me?" Claire looked up from her cup of tea, startled. "What do you mean?" "I know about Marcus," Ethan said quietly, sliding her phone across the table. The blood drained from her face as she realized what he had uncovered. I didn't mean for it to happen," Claire stammered. "It was a mistake, Ethan. It doesn't mean anything." Ethan's voice was steady, but his words cut deep. "Doesn't mean anything? Those messages tell a different story. I trusted you, Claire. We built a life together and you threw it away for what? A fling?" Decisions and consequences. Claire begged for forgiveness, promising it was over, that she would cut Marcus out of her life completely. But Ethan had heard those words before, in a different time, from a different woman. And this time, he wasn't. Sure he could go through it again? I need time, Ethan said finally. I can't just forget this, Claire. You've broken something that may not be fixable. He moved out temporarily, staying with Daniel while he sorted through his emotions. The days that followed were a whirlwind of pain, reflection, and self-discovery. Crossroads, Ethan faced a choice: to fight for his marriage again or to let it go and start anew. He sought therapy, both alone and with Claire, to understand whether their relationship could survive another betrayal. Through it all, he realized something profound. His worth wasn't defined by Claire's actions or anyone else's. He had the strength to stand on his own, to rebuild if necessary. A final decision. After months of soul-searching, Ethan met with Claire one last time. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the weight of their history between them. I've made my decision, Ethan said, his voice calm but resolute. I can't do this again, Claire. I gave you my trust and you broke it. I deserve more than this. We both do. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Ethan. A new beginning. The divorce was amicable, but the pain lingered. Still, Ethan emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose. He poured his emotions into his art, creating a new series that captured the raw vulnerability of betrayal and the power of healing. And this time, as he stood before his work in a crowded gallery, he felt a sense of liberation. He had faced the worst once again and had come out stronger, more determined to live a life defined by his own terms. The shadow of betrayal may have loomed over him, but it no longer controlled him. Ethan was free, ready to embrace the unknown with an open heart and an unbreakable spirit. Revenge for betrayal. The next chapter, Ethan's vengeance, had dismantled Patricia's empire and brought Lena to her knees, but his work wasn't done. For Ethan, true justice required more than the collapse of a reputation. It demanded balance. Patricia and Lena had built their lives on deception, greed, and selfishness, and Ethan wasn't content to simply walk away while they plotted their next rise from the ashes. This chapter of his life wasn't just about punishment. It was about ensuring they understood the depth of their betrayal and the lengths he would go to make sure they never repeated it. Step 6. Planting the seeds of doubt. With Patricia's company in shambles, her allies scattered, and Lena ostracized. From her social circles, Ethan turned his attention to a more personal target: their relationship with one another. He understood that the bond between Patricia and Lena was built on a foundation of ambition and manipulation. If he could introduce cracks in that foundation, their alliance would crumble. He began subtly. Anonymous emails reached Patricia's inbox, suggesting that Lena had played a larger role in the company's downfall than she let on. She knew the risks, one email claimed. She even signed off on some of the illegal deals. Are you sure you can trust her? To Lena, Ethan sent a carefully crafted message pretending to be a former investor. I always suspected your mother threw you under the bus. It's a shame. You could have had a bright future without her dragging you down. The effect was immediate. Over the next few weeks, Ethan heard through mutual acquaintances that Patricia and Lena's once unbreakable bond had grown tense. Rumors of heated arguments behind closed doors began to circulate. Step 7. Turning friends into foes. Ethan didn't stop at their personal relationship. He turned his sights on their remaining allies. There were still a handful of people who had stood by Patricia and Lena despite the scandals. Ethan knew that loyalty in their world was often tied to opportunity. Using the information he'd gathered during his initial investigation, Ethan anonymously tipped off the authorities about several of Patricia's closest confidants. Investigations were launched, and two of her allies were implicated in unrelated scandals. The fallout was swift. One by one, those who had once been loyal to Patricia and Lena began to distance themselves, unwilling to be dragged down by association. Step 8. The public unmasking Ethan's final act of revenge was his most public. He commissioned a large art installation, a dramatic multimedia piece titled Facade. The exhibit featured layers of masks, each symbolizing the lies people wear to hide their true selves. But the centerpiece was the most striking, a towering structure resembling a house of cards, adorned with subtle references to Patricia's empire, faded company logos, shredded contracts, and fragments of media headlines. A single breeze from a hidden fan caused the structure to sway precariously, a reminder of how fragile their facade had always been. The exhibit drew massive attention. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece of social commentary, but those who knew Ethan's story understood its deeper meaning. Patricia and Lena's names were never mentioned, but the implications were unmistakable. The aftermath Patricia, once a titan of industry, retreated from public life entirely. With her reputation in tatters and her allies gone, she sold off her remaining assets and disappeared from the social scene. Lena attempted to rebuild her life, but the strain of losing everything and the whispers of her mother's betrayal left her isolated and bitter. Ethan heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another city, far from the spotlight she once craved. Ethan's closure. For Ethan, the end of his revenge wasn't about triumph or celebration. It was about closure. He had taken control of his life and ensured that those who had wronged him faced the consequences of their actions. But more importantly, he had proven to himself that he was stronger than their betrayal. He had rebuilt his life on a foundation of integrity and resilience, and he had found peace in the knowledge that he had done so without compromising his values. Ethan's story wasn't just one of revenge, it was one of justice, renewal, and the unwavering power of self-respect. As he stood in his studio, surrounded by his art, he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known in years. The betrayal had defined a chapter of his life, but it no longer defined him. Ethan had reclaimed his story, and it was finally his to write. The final chapter. From darkness to light, Ethan knew that even with his revenge complete, the journey wasn't over. The void left by betrayal couldn't be filled by retribution alone. He had to rebuild not only his outer life, but also his inner peace. Finding purpose in the aftermath in the months following the public unmasking of Patricia and Lena, Ethan turned inward. His art, once a medium for his anger and grief, transformed into a reflection of hope and healing. His latest project, a series titled Phoenix Rising, explored the theme of rebirth, how even the most broken can emerge stronger from the ashes. The series gained widespread acclaim, with critics praising Ethan's ability to convey raw emotion and universal truths. Galleries lined up to showcase his work, and his story, now whispered among the art world, added an air of mystique to his growing reputation. An unexpected connection. One evening, after the opening night of his Phoenix Rising exhibit, Ethan was approached by a woman named Isabel. She was a journalist who had followed his career and had a deep appreciation for his ability to channel personal pain into art. "I read about what you went through," Isabel said, her voice soft but sincere. "Most people would have let it destroy them. But you turned it into something beautiful." Their conversation was natural, flowing easily from art to philosophy to the resilience of the human spirit. Isabel wasn't just intrigued by his work. She seemed to understand him in a way few others had. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew. Isabel was kind, intelligent, and unafraid of vulnerability. She had her own scars, her own stories of betrayal and loss, and together they found solace in their shared understanding of pain and the strength it took to overcome it. letting go of the past one day, as Ethan and Isabel sat by a lake near his studio. She asked him a question that lingered in his mind. "Do you ever regret what you did? The revenge, I mean." Ethan was silent for a moment, watching the sunlight ripple on the water. "No," he said finally, "but not because it brought me peace. It didn't, not entirely. Revenge gave me closure, but it also reminded me of how much I'd lost. The real healing came afterward, when I chose to focus on myself instead of what they'd done to me." Isabel nodded. "It's brave to admit that. A lot of people would let the bitterness consume them." Ethan smiled faintly. "I was bitter for a long time, but then I realized carrying that weight wasn't punishing them. It was punishing me. Letting go was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most freeing." A new beginning as time went on. Ethan and Isabel's relationship deepened. Together they traveled, explored new cultures, and created memories that reminded Ethan of the joy life could still hold. He learned to trust again, not blindly, but with the understanding that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. Isabel became his partner, not just in life, but in his creative endeavors, helping him refine his vision and push the boundaries of his art. The legacy of resilience. Years later, Ethan stood in a packed auditorium, delivering a speech to aspiring artists. His latest book, Beyond Betrayal, Finding Beauty in the Broken, had become a bestseller, and his story was now a source of inspiration for others facing their own battles. To anyone who's been hurt, who's felt the sting of betrayal, Ethan said, his voice steady, "Know this, you are more than what's been done to you. Pain may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. You have the power to create something beautiful, not just in art, but in life." The audience erupted into applause, but Ethan's thoughts were elsewhere. He spotted Isabel in the front row, her smile warm and unwavering. In that moment, he realized that his journey wasn't just about revenge or redemption. It was about rediscovering the power of love, love for others, for life, and most importantly, for himself. Ethan had reclaimed his story, and it was no longer one of betrayal and revenge. It was a story of resilience, hope, and the enduring capacity of the human spirit to heal. And this time, as the curtain closed on one chapter, Ethan stood ready to embrace the next, with an open heart and an unshakable faith in the beauty of the unknown. The evolution of Ethan's life. As Ethan's life flourished, he often reflected on the twists and turns that had brought him to this point. Betrayal had once consumed him, but it was no longer the lens through which he viewed his life. Instead, he saw it as a catalyst, a painful but necessary step toward transformation. Building a community, Ethan realized that his story resonated deeply with people who had faced betrayal and adversity. He began hosting workshops and retreats for others who sought to turn their pain into purpose. Held in a serene countryside setting, these events combined art therapy, mindfulness, and personal storytelling to guide participants toward healing and self-discovery. At one such retreat, a young woman named Clara shared her story of heartbreak. She had been betrayed by someone she loved deeply, and her trust in the world had been shattered. As Ethan listened, he saw echoes of his own past in her trembling voice and tear-filled eyes. "Pain has a way of making us feel isolated," Ethan told Clara during one of their sessions. "But the truth is you're never alone. Every crack in your heart is a doorway, an opportunity to grow, to rebuild, to let light in. It's not easy, but it's worth it." Clara later credited Ethan's retreat with helping her rediscover her sense of self. Stories like hers became a cornerstone of Ethan's mission, reinforcing his belief in the power of community and connection. An unexpected letter. One quiet afternoon, Ethan received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address caught his attention. It was from Lena. Ethan hesitated before opening it. He hadn't heard from her in years, and part of him wasn't sure he wanted to. But curiosity won out, and he unfolded the letter carefully. In it, Lena wrote about how the collapse of her life had forced her to confront her own actions. She admitted that she had been selfish and manipulative, driven by her desire for validation and power. She apologized, not just for the betrayal, but for the pain she had caused Ethan. "I've spent years running from the consequences of my choices," Lena wrote. "But the truth is, I can't outrun them. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. Your strength inspired me, even if I didn't see it at the time." Ethan read the letter twice, then set it aside. Forgiveness was a choice, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to make it. But he appreciated the effort Lena had made to reach out, and for the first time, he felt a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. Forgiveness and freedom. Months later, as Ethan and Isabel walked hand in hand through an art gallery, he told her about the letter. Isabel listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" she asked. Ethan considered the question. "Forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook," he said. "It's about freeing myself from the weight of the past. I think maybe I'm ready to let it go." Isabel squeezed his hand. "That's a beautiful thing, Ethan. It takes courage to forgive, not for them, but for yourself." Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. He knew that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. It meant reclaiming his power and choosing to focus on the life he had built rather than the pain he had endured, the fee. Next chapter. As the years passed, Ethan's story continued to evolve. His work as an artist, mentor, and advocate touched countless lives, and his relationship with Isabel deepened into a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Ethan often marveled at how far he had come. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead become the foundation for a life of purpose and fulfillment. In the quiet moments, when he stood before a blank canvas or gazed out at the world with Isabel by his side, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the pain he had endured, but for the strength he had found within himself to rise above it. Ethan's story was no longer about revenge or betrayal. It was about resilience, growth, and the unyielding power of the human spirit to transform darkness into light. And as he stepped into the next chapter of his life, Ethan knew that his journey was far from over. The best stories, after all, are the ones that continue to unfold, leaving us forever curious about what comes next. A life in full bloom. Ethan's life flourished in ways he never imagined. His art and retreats gained international recognition, but more than the accolades, it was the connections he forged that brought him the deepest satisfaction. Through his journey, he had discovered that sharing his pain and growth openly allowed others to find strength in their own struggles. A new milestone. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan and Isabel stood together in a sun-dappled field, surrounded by friends, family, and loved ones. The day had come for a new beginning, a wedding that symbolized the life they had built together. The ceremony was simple yet profound, filled with laughter and quiet tears of joy. Ethan spoke his vows from the heart, promising Isabel not just love, but a commitment to grow together, to face life's challenges with courage and grace. "I once thought my story was written in stone," he said during his vows. "But you showed me that it was still being written. You are my greatest chapter, Isabel, and I can't wait to see what we'll create together." As they exchanged rings, the crowd erupted into applause. For Ethan, the moment was a testament to how far he had come, from the depths of betrayal to the heights of love and renewal. The Gallery of Redemption. Shortly after their wedding, Ethan opened his most ambitious project yet, the Gallery of Redemption. The exhibit was housed in a sprawling building with large, sunlit halls, and it featured art that told stories of survival, healing, and transformation. Each piece was accompanied by a plaque detailing the artist's journey, from the pain that inspired the work to the hope that emerged. The exhibit wasn't just about Ethan's story. It was about giving others a platform to share their own. The gallery became a beacon for people seeking inspiration and healing, drawing visitors from all walks of life. It hosted workshops, lectures, and panels, fostering a sense of community among those who had once felt isolated in their struggles. Revisiting the past one day while working on a new series in his studio, Ethan received an unexpected visitor. It was Lena. She stood in the doorway, hesitant but determined. Time had softened her features, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that Ethan had never seen before. "I heard about the gallery," Lena said, her voice quiet. "I wanted to see it for myself. And to thank you." Ethan set down his brush and faced her. "Thank me?" "For not letting what I did to you destroy you," she said. "For turning it into something beautiful. You've helped so many people, Ethan. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to tell you how much I admire what you've done." Ethan studied her for a moment, then gestured for her to sit. They talked for hours, revisiting their past with honesty and a shared understanding of the mistakes they had both made. By the end of the conversation, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He didn't forgive Lena for her sake. He forgave her for his own, releasing the last vestiges of bitterness that had lingered in the corners of his heart. A legacy of hope years later, Ethan and Isabel sat on the porch of their countryside, home, watching their young daughter paint with watercolors on the patio. The girl's laughter filled the air, a melody of innocence and joy. Ethan often thought about how different his life could have been if he had let betrayal define him. Instead, he had chosen to rise above it, to build a life rooted in love, purpose, and resilience. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the horizon, Isabel leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think she'll ever know the full story?" she asked, nodding toward their daughter. "Someday," Ethan replied. "When she's old enough to understand. But when I tell her, it won't be a story of betrayal. It'll be a story of how we can take the worst things life throws at us and turn them into something good, something worth living for." Isabel smiled, and Ethan felt a profound sense of contentment. His journey had been long and arduous, but it had brought him here, to a life filled with meaning, love, and endless possibilities. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ethan realized that his story wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever faced adversity and chosen to rise above it. It was a story of hope, and it was far from over. The ripple effect of change. As the years continued to unfold, Ethan's story, once marked by pain and revenge, became a beacon for others looking for hope and transformation. Through his art, his books, and the retreats he hosted, Ethan had created something much larger than himself. His work had become a movement, a quiet revolution that encouraged others to take control of their own narratives, no matter how dark the beginning. A new chapter in the Gallery of Redemption. The Gallery of Redemption had long since become a cultural institution. It wasn't just a space for art. It was a sanctuary for anyone who felt broken or lost. The walls were adorned not only with Ethan's own work, but with contributions from artists around the world, each telling their personal stories of survival, forgiveness, and healing. One day, while touring the gallery, Ethan was approached by an old friend, Victor, a fellow artist from his early days. They had lost touch for years after Victor's own struggles with addiction and personal loss had taken him away from the art scene. "Ethan," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have to tell you something. Your work saved my life." Ethan looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I was in a dark place," Victor explained, "but when I saw your Phoenix Rising exhibit years ago, it was like a light turned on. I realized that my past didn't define me. I could still create something beautiful no matter how far I'd fallen. Victor's story was just one of many, but it struck a chord with Ethan. It was a reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place, to use his pain to help others rediscover their strength and rebuild their lives. The power of generosity. With the success of the gallery and his growing influence, Ethan had more resources than he had ever imagined. Yet he never lost sight of the people who had supported him when he was at his lowest. He had seen firsthand how kindness and generosity could change the course of a life, and he was determined to pay it forward. Ethan established a foundation dedicated to supporting individuals affected by betrayal, addiction, trauma, and grief. The foundation funded scholarships for young artists, supported mental health initiatives, and provided resources for those seeking to rebuild after personal crises. One of the foundation's programs, Canvas of Healing, became particularly close to Ethan's heart. It offered free art therapy to people who had suffered abuse, loss, or betrayal, helping them find ways to express their emotions through creative outlets. The foundation's success was not just measured in donations or accolades, but in the stories of recovery and renewal that came from it. Each year, Ethan received letters from participants who had found healing through art, who had turned their pain into something that not only saved them but also enriched the world around them. The ripple effects on his family. Ethan's transformation didn't just impact the world outside, it rippled through his family as well. His daughter, now a teenager, had grown up surrounded by love, art, and the values of resilience and self-discovery. Ethan and Isabel's marriage had only deepened with time, rooted in mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, their daughter asked Ethan, "Dad, do you ever look back and think about how different everything could have been?" Ethan paused, considering the question. His mind immediately went to the years of pain and the dark, lonely nights where he couldn't see a way out. But now, looking at the life he had built, he realized that those struggles were just part of the story. They didn't define him. They shaped him. "Yes," he said, smiling softly. "But I wouldn't change a thing. Those struggles made me who I am today. They taught me that no matter how hard life gets, you always have the choice to rise again." His daughter nodded, taking his words to heart. Passing the torch. As Ethan approached a new phase in his career, he felt a growing desire to pass on his legacy. He began mentoring younger artists, sharing the lessons he had learned, not just about creating art, but about creating lives of purpose. One young artist, Emma, stood out in particular. She had come to the Gallery of Redemption as a participant. In one of the Foundation's programs, her life torn apart by betrayal and loss. Under Ethan's guidance, Emma found not just a way to heal, but a way to express her experience through her art. "Your story is yours to tell, and your pain doesn't have to be a source of shame," Ethan told her one afternoon in his studio. "You can use it to create something that speaks to others. Your voice is powerful." Years later, Emma would be the one leading the Foundation's programs, passing on the same wisdom and support that Ethan had once given her.